Hi everyone and welcome to Rage Print, and this is episode 3 of our chopper build. And look, the barbers have been open again. In this episode we're going to carry on with the build of Chopper's body. We're going to get the side panels on and the back panels, and hopefully we'll get it all done. Why don't you join me and see how we get on? Okay, so here we go. We're going to start working on the inner frame. You see here, those are where the shoulders go into. And those connect onto those as well. So you can see these holes here. Oh yeah, I'm pointing out the little notched area. That's where all the grub screws go in. And there's one on the other side as well. Those two pieces are the only pieces that have that grub screw in that place. So you know that those two go together there like that. And then the other side goes together like that. Easy. So let me just quickly check the instructions, make sure I'm doing this correctly. Yeah, so I'm just going to grab some random M3 nuts and screws, and these are going to go into the screw holes that you can see at the side of one of the shoulder pieces. And that purely, this is just to hold this together. Now I thought, I'll try and be clever, and thought, oh, just put the screw through, that'll be enough. You know, there'll be enough of a... No, there isn't. So it needs to grab hold of the M3 square nuts. I'm not too worried about using these because I get to reclaim them later, so I'm not worried about running out. No random fly just go past the camera. Okay. So, as I said, we're just going to very easily screw those in. Use the smaller screw, yeah, use that. And that's mainly because of the curve. It makes it quite hard to get a whole screwdriver in, so just use the removable bit. So just very quickly screw that in. And then the same at the top. And that'll hold it together enough for me to then glue it together using the EMA plastic weld. But we'll do it on the other side as well. Gotta get really fast at this screwing, aren't I? So I can go into 3 times speed. Right, there we go. So those are screwed together. Just tighten them up, make sure they're nice and tight. So there we are. And that's not far off how they actually go into the body, to be fair. So as I said, EMA plastic weld. And then just very gently brush it down the join marks, and that'll flow into the join and stick it together, and then the bolts will keep it tight and then keep that compression and make that nice permanent weld. And once it's dry we can just take the bolts out. So we'll just finish that one. I'm probably going overboard on the glue. I tend to, and that's mainly just about paranoia. I just don't want the thing to snap right at the wrong point. I suppose it's also because it's PLA is not really designed for EMA plastic weld. It works, don't get me wrong, it works. And it works just as well as using epoxy. But I'm finding you have to use a tiny bit more than you would with styrene. Yeah, and I don't need to crush it together because the screws are doing that for me. So just put those to the side for a minute. And then the next up, we are working on the rear struts. Well, the rear frame, I say. And it's rear strut A, rear strut B, and rear frame top. Now, I realise as I put this together, there you go, there's a screw hole that goes all the way through, comes out the other side, this is where the threaded rod goes through. And I realise as I'm looking at the camera there that actually it's not a perfect circle, so there's a bit of warpage. Yeah, and the threaded rod goes all the way through there as well. yeah, so as I said, as I started to put it together, I realised there's a bit of warpage here. And I have to decide which part I want to be the true side. There's also a bit of wobble in there as well, and that's from the warping where it's on the bed. Yeah, so that's me trying to work out what my true straight line is going to be. Trying to work out where the warping happens. It's fairly obvious in hindsight. It's on the bed, isn't it? That's where the warping is going to be. But obviously I need to make something the straight part. So I make the outside edge of this frame the straight part. So just glue it together. A bit more in there, just keep it together. And at this point I'm going to push it together. In retrospect, I probably should have screwed through the threaded rod at this point to hold it together while gluing to make it that bit stronger, and also it probably would have made it a bit easier when I come to the putting the threaded rod through. I came across a few issues. If I hadn't have stuck it together by that point, I would have found it easier to get the rod through, but we'll see as we get to that, as we get there. A bit more glue in there. Stick it together and brush it around the outside again, and we're done. So you can see that's where the warp happens, and there's a bit of a step again. It doesn't matter too much because that's the outside edge of the frame and nothing actually attaches to it as such. The inside edge I've kept as straight as possible. Because those M3 square nut holes are going to be important to be in the right place. Okay, so just double checking the instructions and see what I've got to do next. And then we realise it's the threaded rods. At this point, I had no idea how much trouble I was putting myself in for. Because it should just slot all the way through, shouldn't it? No, because there's a warp on the print. It's not going through. So I try and manually screw it through, just trying to get past it. I'm thinking there's like a bit of a blockage at the top part of the next part of the print, and it's not. So I try check the other one. Does that one go through? And that one goes all the way through. There's no warpage on that one. And that's how it should go through. Unlike this one. Yeah, so I try a bit of manual screwing back through. And then I just decide to use a power drill and power drill it through. And it worked. It's in. Yeah, it just shows that even if print's warped, you can still use it. It just depends on how warped it is. Okay, so we're now working on the side panel frames. These are fairly simple, they just glue together at that point there. Again, I had a bit of warping, and as it comes back onto camera, you can probably see that one of the threaded rod holes is just slightly off circle. It does cause me problems later. But again, you can see there's a warp, there's a bit of step. It doesn't matter, that part doesn't touch any other part of the body. So it doesn't matter, it's slightly warped. As long as the curve on what would be the top part of the print when it comes off the printer is correct, and then fits on the inside of the side panels, then you're fine. So again, start playing around with the threaded rods, realise that they are warped in the middle. Oh yeah, a bit of brim that I forgot to remove. Yeah, so one goes more or less all the way through, the other one doesn't. As I said, get the power drill and just effectively use it as a massive drill bit. This does come back and bite me later, as I'll discuss. But yeah, just powder it through and use it as a drill bit to get it to push all the material out of the way, get it all the way through. So one thing it doesn't know on Mike's instructions is how far to push that threaded rod through. So I kind of went equal both sides to start with. Yeah, so now just a bit of EMA in the join mark. Threaded rod's helping to push it together. Just give it a bit more help as I'm gluing it. And then just let that dry. And then it's a case of just rinse and repeat for the other one. So again, putting the threaded rod through. From memory, I don't think either of these ones went through properly. No, they didn't. Neither one went through properly. Ended up having to power drill both through. There you go. Top tip: if your threaded rods don't go through, just use a power drill. Just be prepared to fix the issue you cause later on. So there we go. That's one through. Yeah, this took a while. Quite a while. It's about 45 minutes just to do this one. I'm not joking. It was about 45 minutes just to get that one through. And that's just the last couple of minutes there that you're seeing. So, yeah. Should I reprinted it? Possibly. But it's in. It's done. So, again, like the other one, we just glue it back together. Glue it together. It was never in one piece. Glue it together. And then that's it. That's joined together pretty much. So that goes to the side. Don't want my glue to evaporate. So now we're going to work on side support left and right. You see the notch there in the shoulder? That goes on the opposite side of the triangle. Yep. That's how you remember which way around they're supposed to go. And we're going to use some M3x30 countersunk screws and some M3 square nuts. And you need 8 per frame. And this is kind of Mike's ingenious build here, in that those 8 screws give you both the side support and the bottom support into the body. So I say now I should have done this a bit easier. For some reason I keep making life hard for myself and putting these screws in. I should have just done it one at a time. I was trying to be clever. And I probably made things harder for myself. Anyway, so little square nuts go in there on the side frame. And then that goes on the leg frame side, and then just screw it in. And then repeat that another 7 times. So as I do this, and just making sure that it stays square, because I want the bottom of the side panel to be flush to the bottom of the leg frame, because obviously that then attaches to the inside of the main body itself. As I just said, I could have done this a lot easier than I did. I was trying to be clever, and it ended up taking twice as long as it should have. I learnt a lot from this part of the build, this entire video. I've learnt a lot of things of what not to do and what should have been a little bit easier than it was. But that's the point of any build, isn't it? You start to learn new ways of doing things, or better ways of doing things, usually in hindsight. Yeah. So just sorting the camera out, I realised it had gone purple again. I'm not quite sure why it keeps doing that. I think it's because of the light outside. And the camera just tries to be clever and compensate. So there you go. You can see you can now actually see the 8 square nuts in there. My hand gets out of the way. There you go. And it is literally rinse and repeat for the other one. Oh yeah, these are the little tie blocks. We'll come back to those in a minute, but I just run a bit of EMA along there just to give it a bit more a bit more strength. I can't see me ever needing to remove them. I can't see any point in removing them. So I might as well glue them together. Give it that extra chemical bond as well as the mechanical bond. And as I said, it's a repeat. I thought I'd try it a different way this time. Let's put the square nuts in first, because they're not going to fall out as soon as I turn it over, are they? But anyway, line the holes up. Why did I do it this way? Why did I yeah. See, when you even question yourself, you know that maybe you need to think before you start doing things. Anyway, so again, as I said, it's rinse and repeat. Just get the next 8 ones in. Of course, the square nut's going to fall out as soon as you tip it. And there we go. And again, same as before, just glue it to the side to the leg support itself. And that bit's done. And now we look at the shoulder ties or side ties. Side ties shoulder, as Mike calls them. Let's get the remaining nuts out of the way. So these things, they attach the side panels to the body, and there's a screw that goes in there, and then there's a square nut that goes in to the one side there as well. And those are the M314s in this case. Yeah, you put some square nuts in there. Because you won't be able to access these afterwards. So just to make sure they're in roughly the right place, I decided to put a couple of screws in. And again, the screws are going to be reclaimed, so I don't care which screws they are, as long as they're M3 and they hold this square nut in place. When you come to do this bit, I highly recommend just putting a bit of hot glue in there, because I thought doing the screws here would help, and when I go to remove the screws and then put them in the body, they're staying roughly the right place. They didn't. So a bit of hot glue. Yeah, screw it into place like I'm doing now. Put a dab of hot glue, let the hot glue set. You can take the screw back out. You know that M3 nut is going to stay exactly where you put it. So there we go. As I said, these are the side ties. Put an M3 square nut in there. And then an M315. So it's easier to see on this one because it's black and white. There's a little hole there. The side tie pops in, the square bit, the side tie pops in there. And you put the M315, or M314 in my case, into that little hole just inside the side panel. Like so. and that attaches the side tie into the frame. It's exactly the same process for the other one. In fact, you can see on the other one, you can see the little screw hole inside that sort of cutout on the side support. Again, just run it M314. Yep, just in there. And that just gets screwed in. Done. Now I have screwed that quite tight. In a minute I will actually loosen it slightly. What we do now is we're going to attach the shoulder pieces to the side panels, and this is where you want to loosen the ties very, very slightly, because the tie slots into the bottom of the side panel, and you kind of need that in order to get the shoulder hub through. You need to loosen the tie slightly to sort of get that angle. That's me just checking which way around they go, because they do only fit one way. I'm just double checking that I'm not going to glue and screw it into the wrong side. So you can see there that because of the ties in the way, you can't quite get the angle. So if you loosen it very slightly, yeah, so it should go in there. So just, yeah, that's me trying to work out why it's not going in. It's like, yes, I need to loosen it very slightly. And that is literally it, just so it's like a wobbly tooth. And then you clip the tie in and then push the shoulder hub through. So it should sit roughly halfway into the skin. Screw back in because I obviously untightened it too much. And then Mike says not to tighten it back up at this point, but actually I don't think it'll be much difference. And then you see the two screw holes there, and the two N3 square nuts. Put them somewhere, there we go. Yeah, so two M3 square nuts. Go in those little holes there. And then two M330s. Looking for now. Should have kept them out from earlier. And the M330s go through there, and they attach the shoulder frame, the shoulder hub to the side panels. There we go. Just in there. And then these get actually covered up by the leg, so it doesn't matter, you can see them. To be honest, you could just polyfill over the top. And it's at this point I think it's strong enough I could probably just undo the screws there and recover the bolts. Especially before I get too far into it, I'm not able to access it properly. Okay, that's all one done, and then it is literally repeat again for the other side. And just clearing out a bit of brim that's still in there. Yeah, I'll speed this up because you've seen me do it once already. You don't need to see me do it in complete real time. Let's tighten it back up. I think the black on white makes it a bit easier to see sometimes, doesn't it? It's going to be a nightmare to paint afterwards. Okay, just tidying up a bit of brim around there, it's still stuck in, making sure it's nice and clean inside. Removing those last couple of bolts. Because they're not needed anymore, just like on the other one. And then I'm just quickly checking it over, make sure there's no other issues. Double checking the instructions as well, that I haven't missed anything. And the same on the other side, making sure I haven't missed anything. Double checking the tightness of some of the bolts. And then add a bit of glue down to the sides and across the top, just to stick it together. A bit, in inverted commas. But anyway, that'll soak through and it should stick the majority of it to each other. It's not going to soak all the way through, it just won't soak through enough before it evaporates. But it'll be enough. And then the same, repeat on the other side. And just double checking the tightness, and that's done. Hello, welcome to day 2 of Andy Makes a Mess of Screwing Stuff In. So we'll start off with the grub screws, and there's 26 of those. And they go around the top of what's currently there, where I'm pointing now. So again, just double checking that I don't need to actually screw the grub screws in, because I found some don't need it, some do. So just checking that one. And not as nice as day as it was the day before. So mixing up the epoxy and just dipping the screw in and then pushing the grub screw as far as it'll go. And just making sure there's no epoxy that spills over, because otherwise it won't give a tight fit. As you can see, a couple of them do actually need screwing in. And then telling fibs, it's only 16, 26 is on the next step. So it's just a 16 there across the back of the frame. And then we look at attaching here. So the screws from yesterday, they can now be removed, and this is where I wish I'd hot glued them in, because I now can't get to the things because of the side panel is in the way. So something I do is make sure that the threaded rods are flush with the side panel. Get my trusty drill out again. Just magically appeared in my hand. There we go, so that's now flush. Even though there are holes in the bottom of the frame that the threaded rods go through. This is more just to make sure I can get it in against the grub screws. So we just push it into place. The bone-shaped connector and the T-shaped tie hold everything in place. So just pushing it into place, making sure there's all, there's no random grub screws that are going to get in the way. I don't have the corresponding hole on the other side. And mix up some more epoxy, and then this is the race against time of adding epoxy and fast evaporating EMA plastic weld to these grub screws. And I'm trying to do it as quick as possible because I'm conscious of the fact that epoxy's setting and that's evaporating. So that gets pushed back in together. And then just to make sure it's going to stay in place, I am going to screw the threaded rods into the body itself, because then I know it's locked in place. And just making sure that it will actually go all the way through. I'm also noticing that there's actually a slight warp on the side panels. In fact, you can see it when the body turns over, where the white, the black, and the white join. There's a triangle. There's a slight gap. So, as I said, I'm screwing, drilling the threaded rod through. Yeah, so it pops out the other side. And then same again on this one. Probably didn't need to screw this one through as much, because actually all that's stopping it going through was just a tiny bit of brim. Put this in. And those eventually will have some nuts attached. And that's the next day's hell. That's in. I notice there's a bit of a step there which doesn't look right. Should there be a step there? I'm not sure there should be. I'm just trying to make sure that it is actually pushed down as far as possible. I'm trying to work out where this step might come from. I think it's the bread pans. There you go. Then I noticed the other gap that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Something I realised as I was trying to put this on, that actually it's trying to pull itself back apart again. So even though I put more plastic weld in there to glue it together, and that starts to be the part of the job you need to do, I realise I'm going to actually need some proper compressive strength on it. Unfortunately, I don't have any big enough clamps for that to sort of do it across the top to the bottom of the body to push it down. That would have helped enormously if I'd been able to do that. As it is, the slight warp isn't enough to worry about, and it's going to get filled in with putty anyway. There you go, just giving it the count of 10 to push it together. And then the two N3 screws there. So these are the ones I took out earlier, and now going back in because they're now attaching inside the bread pan. I must admit, this is where I'm thinking that actually maybe the bread pan isn't warped, because the hole does line up. So maybe that step is intentional. Now, Mike does say that this screw is awkward. It's very awkward. So you can get your screwdriver through there, which, you start to think, well, that's going to be a bit easier. That's not going to be quite as hard as I think. And then you realise that the M3 square nut's moved. So when you come to do this bit, make sure you have hot glued that square nut in place. This will probably be much easier for you. As you can see here, I'm having all sorts of fun. Trying to get the square nut back into position. Even using my camera to try and work out if I can see the square nut. I'm just waiting for that clunk that you know that it's actually attached. And it never seems to happen. You never seem to get that clunk to say that it's actually connected to the nut. Yeah, so Mike is not joking when he says that this bit is extremely tight for space and a bit fiddly. And then the best bit is you've got to do it all over again on the other side. So probably I'm getting more and more frustrated with this damn screw. The thing is, always doing is just creating more compressive force between the two pieces so I can glue it together. But I mean, I've sped this up to 3 times speed, and I've edited bits out. I think this was about 40 minutes. Oh yeah, don't drop your rear frame on the floor either. So finally got the screw in. And then I realised as I pick it up that I've got to do the other side. And it's like, So anyway, that one's in. I think it's fairly tight. And it's just running glue around it. Again, and at the sides, because now it's screwed together, it should be a bit of a tighter join. And create more of a physical connection. That little hole there, you need to make sure you don't get any glue in there. That's for the nylon thread that goes through to control the door servos. It's not so much an issue using the Plastic-Weld EMA stuff, but if you're using epoxy, you could quite easily fill that hole up without realising. Alright, pick up the rear frame that you threw on the floor. Then realise you've got to do this all over again for the other side. Remove the screw of doom. Make sure the M3 square nut's in position before you move it. I'm also moving the M4 threaded rods up a bit as well. Test fit. Make sure I've got no grub screws that are going to be annoying. And that the bone and T piece sit flush. Now that one was actually quite tight. I could have probably just left it. So, in fact, I was even considering that at that point. But no, decided to do it properly. Put the epoxy down. And then some EMA. and over the bone piece as well, and then into the hole for the tie shoulder piece. And then, like before, just push it down, and then drill the threaded rods through into the body. Seeing how far they come out the other side. You don't want to accidentally drill through into your table, because that'd be stupid, wouldn't it? Because guess what I did? Yeah, and as we're going, oh, what a screw. So again, this is about 45 minutes of fun and frolics of me trying to get a screw into a screw hole. This one was a little easier in the fact that I already worked out that it's the M3 square nut the problem, not the positioning of the side panel itself. So using the phone again to work out where it is. In fact, you know what? You don't need to see this. You don't need to see 45 minutes. So anyway, screws in. Done. Just double checking it's tight. So that is me 45 minutes later putting the screw in. So now we're putting the rear frame in. And something you have missed from me cutting is actually putting some glue around the edges of where my hand is now. But anyway. Yeah, just slot the rear frame through. It's got two grooves going on the inside of the rear side panels. And again, just drilling the threaded rod through into the body. As I said before, it'd be really silly to drill into your table, wouldn't it? Really, 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 really silly. Like I did just there. Anyway, so I decided that the whole thing needs tightening up, just to while I glue it together to make sure that it's actually really compressed, stays, all together. Grab a ratchet strap. And you should never lend your ratchet straps out, because when you get them back, you can't quite work out how they managed to get the string through the wrong side. Anyway, ignoring that, tighten that up, and then I run some glue on the inside of the side panels and then against the rear frame itself. Because apart from those two threaded rods, there's no mechanical way of attaching the rear skins to the side skins to the inner frame. It's all glue at this point, and this is where the warping starts causing me a tiny bit of issue. Just tighten it up again, make sure it is pressing against the inner frame. And then just use some C-clamps, G-clamps. And then just tighten it as far as possible so the side skin is compressed against the inner frame. In as many places as you've got clamps, use as many clamps as you've got. Oh, and if you can hear the rain, yeah, it's May bank holiday, isn't it? So it's raining. This may slow down my building. It's supposed to be raining for another couple of weeks now. Anyway, back to what I did before. So you see I'm running glue around the edges and let it soak through. The pressure of the clamps is now making sure that it creates that nice join. I'm putting plenty of glue in there. I always put plenty of glue. I'm putting more glue. And then that is done. Just making sure there's no other issues that I've forgotten. And we're done. And welcome to day 3. So first of all, we'll start by removing the straps and the clamps. You don't know if you noticed, I've put an extra couple of clamps on. When I took it back inside after day 2, I realised it wasn't quite enough, so I put a few extra clamps on and ran some more glue around the inside. So just double checking that nothing's going to pop apart as soon as I take the ratchets off. And you see the sun's back out, so the parasol's in the way to stop the sun changing the camera. And then we remove the ratchet strap. Now today we'll be doing the top ring and then putting the screws on to the threaded rods. I was hoping to get more done that, I was hoping to get the skirt done, but the threaded rods became a nightmare. So day 3 is hell, day 2 is purgatory, day 3 is hell. So I'm quite happy they're not moving, they're not popping apart, they're all nice, they're all welded together. So yeah, we're good to go. So, oh yes, before we do the top ring, it's the magnets. So you can see there's 2 magnets that go there and 2 magnets that go there. So they're 10mm diameter by 5mm deep N52 neodymium magnets. So I was going to use super glue and then change my mind and I use epoxy instead. So just put a bit of epoxy on. I miss the sunshine. So it is literally gale force winds and rain in May. Anyway, a bit of epoxy in the hole. Make sure you get the polarity the same way round for every single magnet when you put these in. Remember that. So just slide the magnet in. Make sure it stays level. It should recess in very, very slightly. Yeah, 2 go in there. The epoxy's dried already. I changed epoxy, by the way. I'll now be using Gorilla because it gives you 5 minutes rather than 1 minute. But yeah. But just put a bit in each hole there. And again, put the magnets in. Same polarity as the ones you just put in on the bottom. And there you go. Magnets are in. And we just leave that to dry. So now we're going to build the top ring, and there's 6 pieces and the bone rings. This is quite simple really, it's just 1 to 6. Start with number 1 and number 2. You can tell number 2 has a slight notch in it and a notch on number 3. And it is literally just run a bit of glue around the join. Push together, run a bit in the bone hole and put a bone piece in like that, and just push together until it's set. Make sure it stays flat as possible. A couple of these did warp. I keep getting a lot of warping on the ender at that point. I mentioned it before, but I changed the ender to another sidewinder and I have not had warping since. So yeah, piece 3. Join together and pop a bone in. As you can see, I'm going black on white so you can see the colour difference. And just run a bit more plastic weld around the edges. The top ring lulled me into a false sense of security in how well today was going to go. Piece number 4. Pop another bone piece in, and again some more glue. Just push it together so it compresses. And then smooth out the melted plastic to create a weld. There you go. So I'm checking here because Mike mentioned about a hole. And I'm looking for the said hole. Because this is where the filament goes through into the bread pans. I'm looking for the hole and making sure which hole it is, and I haven't just either covered it up or put a bone piece into it. And I'm almost convinced when I'm doing it that I've somehow put a bone piece over a hole. Anyway, I realise what I've done. I haven't. I can just carry on. Piece number 5. Stick the bone in. Instantly, all these bone pieces are the same size, so you could just print off, I don't know, 20 of them, 30 of them, and maybe the same piece that goes in every single body piece. And last of all, piece 6. And just slot together and glue in. Having a flat table at this point would be more handy rather than a bent old pasting table. There are times I wish my workbench was slightly wider to be able to do this. Do it inside rather than doing it on this pasting table. So I'm trying to keep it flat, knowing there's a dip. If that makes sense. We're pretty much done there. That's the top ring ready. Just leave it to dry. On a flat surface. Right. Now we start working on the body. So we remove those 2 screws that we put in yesterday. Those are the 2 remaining screws. As I remove them, I'm having nightmares about the day before, hoping it's not going to be hell to put these ones in. So, grub screws, lots of them. And this is where you want the 26 grub screws. And it is 26 this time. So, dip in the epoxy. And then it is just running 26 grub screws all the way around. Again, making sure you don't put a grub screw or glue anywhere into the hole for the nylon thread. It is smaller, so you shouldn't mistake it for a grub screw hole. But Mike does say to mark it. It's just a case of trying to get as many grub screws in as before the epoxy starts to set. Incidentally, I know I'm speeding this up into 3 times speed to try and make it more of a manageable episode. If you'd rather I just cut these repetitive bits out, I'm quite happy to do that in future episodes. Just let me know in the comments. Kind of wanted to make it as this is what a build is. You know, all the steps I go through without trying to cut too much out, unless it's me fuming over trying to get a screw into a hole. So you can see here I'm putting in the last few grub screws around the front, around the utility arm frame. And there must be a couple that need screwing and they won't just push through. Now notice these extra holes. There, and there. Don't put any grub screws into those. They actually have spaces for M3 nuts. And Mike doesn't mention those in the instructions, actually. I've just double checked now as I'm going. So 26 grub screws. Done. So now we attach the top ring, and that notch there matches the notch for the side for the shoulder frame. So you just line the holes up for the threaded rod, and they should slide through. Assuming, of course, you've put it the right way round in the first place. Like that. Yeah. Anyway. So those line up. So the two in the back rear frame, the two on the shoulders just push through. And then that should attach down through the grub screws as well. And this is just a dry fit at this point, just to see how it goes. I suddenly realise there's no hole for one of the grub screws. As we get about halfway round, I can't remember where it is. Here. No, where is it? Yeah, it's here. I suddenly realised there's no hole for one of the grub screws. So I pull it out and then just, yep, there's no hole there that matches up. Which is confusing. No hole. So just pull the grub screw out before the epoxy dries too much. Yep, and then just put the top frame on. It should just snap in at this point. As soon as no other errant grub screws that don't have a corresponding hole. Now, this is on at this point, and I'm just debating, should I glue it? Should I glue it, or should I just put it on and leave it? Because I know it's going to get screwed down with the M3 nuts. And in the end, I do decide to put a bit of glue down, just for that extra bit of support. You'll notice a grub screw came out of the top ring when I pulled the top ring off. And I put it back into the wrong hole. Because I go to put the frame back on. And I think, oh, hang on a minute. There's another grub screw won't go in. It's the same one, I just put it back into the wrong hole. So that's now on. Yeah, so there's two M3 nuts that go in there. And two M310s even. No, M315s, I apologise. M315s. And that screws through the top frame into the rear. Sorry, top ring into the rear frame. And that's as far as the instructions say on that point. However, and I'm double checking this because I'm fairly confident it doesn't mention it, but there are those ones there as well. So I decide, as they're there, I might as well use them. And to be fair, if I do need to unscrew them later, at least I can just unscrew them later. But it does help with pressing down and making sure that the glue is going to set. So those two screws I just put in are the M3 nuts that went in the side panels from Purgatory Day yesterday. Yeah. And then the last remaining M3 nuts go in there. I fiddle around trying to fit them in. And while I think about that, actually, the previous episode we talked about the that screw hole in the bottom of the utility arm frame that goes into the body, and the fact the instructions don't mention to put a M3 nut or a screw in. I spoke to Mike about it, and he said it was probably, he doesn't remember why he did it, but it's probably just an artifact from a previous design iteration that he forgot to remove. That being said, when you get to this point, if you do remember, by all means put a nut in there and a screw, and just an extra bit of help, but it's not needed. And we're done. I debated putting glue around the edges. I decided not to ultimately in the end, but that's it, done. So before we go any further, let's talk about threaded rods. I spent an hour and a half trying to get the six nuts onto the end of the threaded rods, and that's 6 on the top, 6 on the bottom. It took me a very, very long time, and that's mainly because I didn't chamfer the edges after I cut the rods in half, and I ended up having to cut a new thread into the nuts as I was screwing it in. It was painful, it was annoying. I've decided to cut out the entire thing other than the last couple of seconds where I finished off, because I didn't want to put anyone else through the pain of watching me do this. Yeah, so I guess we can take from this, chamfer the edges of your threaded rods, and also you don't need the entire length of the threaded rod. Push it through a bit more so you've got a bit more to work with, rather than trying to screw it into the plastic. Give yourself a bit of room to work with. And now back to your regularly scheduled build video. So after that little brief interlude, as you can see, I'm now finishing off putting on the nuts. Yeah, don't do what I did. Do it properly. Push the rods through, for God's sake, push the rods through. And you're done. Ugh, hour and a half. Might have been a bit longer, I forget now. I really have brought it out of my memory. Done. Right, and now we're building the back panel. A couple of magnets. It's the same magnets as we used before on the inner frame. Of course, it's a reverse polarity. A bit of epoxy glue, if you have any left. And make sure that you get the polarity the right way around. But first, it's the same thing. Grub screws in. Line them all up. A bit of EMA. A bit of epoxy on the other side, and just compress them together, same as in the rest of the build. And then a bit more EMA just to make sure the bit sticks around the edges. And yeah, just compress it together, and that's ready. So we just leave it to set for a little while. And I'm brushing more glue on it. For some reason this wasn't quite sticking together, even though it's just 2 pieces of plastic. Done. Right. Magnets, as I said, it's the same magnets as before. Wherever I've put them. It's the same magnets as before, but obviously this time you want the reverse polarity so that they snap together. Remember, I just said that. They should be the opposite polarity to what you had before. So in they go, and I just checked on the body. That's why there's a jump cut. So they're in. More epoxy. Yeah. Pop the magnets in, and that's it, done. 4 magnets, back door. So what was the bit I said in the video about making sure the magnets were the right polarity? Yeah. I honestly don't know how I did it. I've watched the video back about 3 times trying to work out at what point I sort of flipped the magnet over. So yeah, I went to go and put it onto the back panel, and these two just went click as they should, and this one just went, no, don't like that, don't like that. So as you can see, it's a bit mucky. I dug them out with a knife, and it was yeah, it's not the neatest thing in the world. They're stuck back in, not even flat. But luckily the magnets on the other side are slightly recessed, so it kind of compensates for that. It's not very neat. There's a good chance I might just reprint this and put new magnets in, assuming I've got enough spare magnets. If not, I'll have to order some more. And yeah, let's not talk about the nuts on the threaded rods. Yeah, that was excruciating. I think I said it in the voiceover, but an hour and a quarter of me messing around with those nuts, just trying to get them on. And it's literally where because I cut the rods in half and didn't chamfer the edges. It's my own fault. It's completely my own fault, but I just did, yeah, that's why I didn't even bother putting it in the video. Just like, you don't really want to see an hour of me getting frustrated and sitting there and staring at the thing and going, why are you not screwing in? Anyway, they're in, they're done. And it does help to read the instructions, because then I noticed that I don't actually need all the length of that threaded rod. I can just chop it off. So I could just screw it through further and probably would have not had half the problems I did. There you go. But anyway, that's most of the body built, or the main body anyway. We now have a back panel. Next up is the skirt. And I think after that is the like doors. So I'm trying to think about how we're going to do this, because the body instructions, the PDF, goes all the way through and says, put the doors in, put the servo holder in for the utility arm, and the servos in for the doors themselves. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's great. We can put that all in, and the greeblies as well. I put those all in, but actually makes it quite hard to paint, because then we have to start masking off the servos and the holes to make sure we don't get the mechanism all gunked up. So what I think we might do is come back to it later. Put the doors on, certainly, and put them on the hinges, but not servo them up. Put the hinge block, put the servo block in for the utility arm, but again, not put the servo in, especially as I haven't actually put the utility arm in anyway. And then we'll work from there, and basically we'll just build the body up. I'll leave the greeblies off completely, paint the back of the back behind the greeblies, when we spray it all over, and then do the greeblies separately, and then stick them on last thing. And same with the little yellow square panel that's on Chopper's body. I think we'll put that on last as well. I know Mike says to screw it on, so I think we'll just paint the entire body and then put those extra bits on afterwards. And then I think we're good to go from that point. I'm going to put the skirt on. There's quite a big part of Chopper's body that'll go on. And I think from memory, that's all the body done. And then we start moving on to, I think we'll do the legs next. And the centre foot. I think we'll probably do the centre foot, and then we'll do the legs, and they'll all go on at the same time. We'll attach them all to the body at the same time. And then we'll have Chopper on 3 legs. And then it'll be the head and the head mechanisms. Doesn't sound a lot, does it? It is a lot. I mean, let's face it, I've just spent 5 hours or more building that bit. And I'm only halfway through the first PDF, really. So there is a lot to do. The weather's gone a bit rubbish. He says looking out the window and it's raining now. The weather's gone a bit rubbish, so I don't know how much we're going to get a chance to do any work outside in the meantime. I could build it in here, but the workbench is in front of me. There's not really enough room to put Chopper on and build him and have the camera looking down. Hence why I'm building outside. But I could do some of the small bits. I mean, I could have done this bit inside. So we'll see. I'll try and get some done. If not, there might be a bit of delay before the next video. That's enough rambling from me. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.